Hello, I am Alex or Mont, and this is an analysis of the gameplay reveal trailer of Dark Souls 3 that just came out of Gamescom. If you'd like to see the actual trailer, I'll have a link to it in the description. This video will include stills from that trailer with some commentary on them. If you noticed anything that I didn't, feel free to share it in the comments below. That said, let's get started. The trailer starts off with something all Souls fans are doubtless familiar with, the sight of the Dark Sign accompanied by the sounds of the narrator from the first Dark Souls, whose first phrase is one we've heard before, yes indeed, but after that we get something new. It's a little hard to make out, but this is what I hear. Yes indeed, as they say on pilgrimage, the fire fades and the lords have no thrones. I might be mistaken though, and if you hear something else, please do correct me. After this we get a look at the typical Dark Souls landscape, a city with soaring towers and fantastic architecture, illuminated with a tired yellow glow. This kingdom is one that has fallen, a scene very familiar to us at this point. Is this the new Undead Burg, new Anor Londo or Dranglake Castle type area? Probably. I think it's safe to assume this is the Undead Burg or Cardinal Tower or Central Yharnam equivalent that'll kick off the game, as FromSoft have a trend of showing only areas from the early parts of the game in detail. Also, pay close attention to this circular window in the bottom right. We'll go back to that in a bit. The next shot appears to be in the same area, and what would a Souls game be without a bridge dragon? This one actually appears to be a dragon too instead of a wyvern or drake, albeit it's one made of stone. Its design makes me think of the dragon shown in the Dark Souls 2 CGI announcement trailer that somewhat resembled Calamite, and you may remember that dragon never showed up in Dark Souls 2. Maybe they're reusing its design to some extent. Needless to say, I expect this dragon will impede your progress and burn you to a crisp during the game's opening hours. The effect of ash blowing from its body is rather beautiful though. The next shot is the same area once again, I think. Similar lighting and architecture. This city, could it be Lodoleth? Lodoleth? We are seeing lots of red banners and the like, and just by going by Shulver, we know that the Drakeblood Knights wore red proudly, associating it with dragon's blood. Looks like something nasty happened here, but notice how the light frames the statue? Classic. A small ray of hope amongst despair. Next up we have Hollows praying? What struck me about this scene in particular, you know how trees will grow towards the light? That is what this scene reminded me of. I'm not entirely sure why, but there you go. This scene takes place in the same as the others so far, in what may be Lodoleth. Oh boy, this next shot might be my favourite of the trailer. Does it remind anyone else of the Tower of Latria? And seeing that this strange creature is holding a brand, yes indeed, the Dark Sign brands the undead. Interesting. Maybe that actual brand has something to do with marking the undead or some such. The fact that it's holding a lantern and appears to be in some form of jail makes me think that yes, this is a Latria themed area to some extent. And it also shows us this, well, what on earth is that supposed to be? Vaguely reminds me of another Latria enemy, so there's that at least. Horrible, at any rate. So let's move on. Not much to say on this shot. Some sort of congregation of priestly hollows all wearing red, one of whom is sporting a rather fancy hat. But all this red, I wonder if this area is where the Drakeblood Knights of the Sunken King DLC came from. I doubt it, but all the red is making me think of them, and the next shot might be connected with that, as this area seems to be an altar or some such, judging from the large amount of candles. Makes me think of Cainhurst Castle, in particular Annalise's chambers. We also see our hero here, with their torch. Now this shot is interesting. It takes up a large part of the trailer and we see a knight wearing a suit of armour that appears to be a blend of the Dark Souls standard knight armour and the Demon Souls male fluted set. This is one of two sets that appear prominently in this trailer. The other is, I believe, the poster knight armour that we'll probably see on the cover. You can easily distinguish the two by looking at the back of the helms. The fluted one has a rounded back, whereas the other one has a spiky back, almost like a crown. Both sets look very nice, but more interesting than that, he appears to be creating a bonfire by way of using a hollow's corpse. Well, all bonfires had a lot of bones in them, but we've never been able to create them before. I wonder what this could entail for gameplay. Will we be able to create our own bonfires? What if that plays into the game's difficulty? For example, you could create more bonfire checkpoints, but that could have a negative impact elsewhere. Or maybe they are a limited item that you have to choose wisely. Where do you want to use it? Where do you want to make a bonfire? Either way, the concept of creating your own checkpoint in a Souls game would really mix things up. Finally, we get to see some gameplay. And whilst these are just stills, if you look at the clips in motion, it becomes obvious that the pace of Bloodborne is somewhat in play here. Whilst the heavy armour and weapons remain, the gameplay seems somewhat faster and more frantic than prior Souls games. This first short clip features flipping skeletons and the player is wielding scimitars and wearing the poster knight set that I mentioned earlier. Notice the spiky parts on the helm? And then we have a character who somewhat resembles a Drakeblood knight. Again, that's probably just coincidence, but it never hurts to mention it. The very first thing I thought upon seeing this enemy, however, was how he reminded me somewhat of a Border Knight. And after that, I suppose that he might be like the Black Knight of this game, or the Blue Eyes Knight from Demon's Souls. And see that background object to the left of the knight? It looks rather like one of those hermits from the first Dark Souls 3 trailer who had shells strapped to their backs. Only this one appears to be, perhaps, petrified or a statue. What do you think? Other than that, we see the player character performing a fast roll that seems identical to the Demons, Dark Souls and Bloodborne rolls, followed up by a heavy overhead attack that inflicts a heavy stun on the knight enemy. Is that a bastard sword or claymore? Looks like one. And the shield looks a little bit like the Dranglake shield, huh? I'm not really sure what to say about this part, just spooky skeletons. But this scene, other than the fantastic looking lighting, please no downgrade, the player character here uses something very Force-like, an extremely quick shockwave that seems to stun the hollow, and then causes the player to glow? This is also the third set of armour we see, a bandit style character with a large round shield and a battle axe. Sounds good to me. But is that a miracle, a spell, a weapon art? Well, we'll have to wait and see, but the startup is almost instant, which makes it look useful, whatever it turns out to be. Cool halberd here. Lanky enemy and looks kinda nasty to fight, but here we see improved bow play. The character is using a short bow in one hand, and after dodging the enemy attack fires a quick shot at the enemy, and then follows it up with another roll and a classic style backstab. Whether you love it or hate it, it looks like Dark Souls and Demon's Souls style backstabs are returning. Will they work in PvP? Will they dominate the meta gameplay? Who knows, but I am very curious as to why they've gone back to this, as I feel Bloodborne's backstab mechanics were a huge improvement. In general, the game seems to be Dark Souls movement style, as opposed to Dark Souls 2, although I think I saw multi-directional rolls, which I don't believe the original Dark Souls had. This clip takes place in maybe Lodoleth once again, and features a number of enemies being slashed up by a fast spinning combo. Is that a new dual-wield weapon art or something? I think so. But it's very fast, so maybe rogue or thief style combat will be a lot more satisfying this time, with new abilities such as this. Looks good. Is this the biggest enemy in any of the Souls games? Quite possibly. Will you actually fight it? Or is it just something we have to run away from? The area appears to be some kind of mine, and the enemy looks like it has a mask or strange helm. Is it a giant? A Dark Souls 2 giant? Something new? The fact that it appears to be in a mine suggests that either it was chained up and used as labour, or maybe some hidden secret that was uncovered by pesky miners digging too deep. Who knows, maybe it's a Lord of Cinder roused from slumber, and between the character's legs there we can see what appears to be one of the cage elevators that have been around since Demon's Souls. And what on earth is this thing supposed to be? Silver, smo, rolling hammer, man, beast, pig, dog thing? I don't like him, he looks horrible. And when I say that, I mean it in a positive sense. He looks horrible in a good way. Yeah. This boss looks rather tough, assuming it is a boss, but something to note, when he knocks down the player, the Bloodborne style roll recovery from the ground thing makes an appearance, which also means bosses will probably be attacking us on the ground, like in Bloodborne. And who knows, maybe we'll get other Bloodborne style gameplay mechanics. Another boss here, and if the last one was a fatty like Smo, this one is Ornstein. Thin where the other was fat, lanky and rather spooky looking. The enemy is surrounded by a wispy veil of hair or fabric that moves in a very attractive manner that is rather mesmerising. though I doubt you'll notice it much during the gameplay. And there's 3 things I want to point out about this scene. First up, the enemy does a grab attack where it impales the player with a blazing sword, almost like what the player did to the Hollow, perhaps to create a bonfire. Maybe that's where you learn how to do it after you beat this character, like the Rite of Kindling style thing. The hall in which they are fighting appears to be on fire. Is that the boss setting it on fire, and what sort of effect could it have on the battle itself? Last, the circular window on the left there, see? Is that the same window that I mentioned at the start of the video? On the bottom right? If so, that would suggest that if this whole area is early game, perhaps this boss is equivalent to Capra Demon, in that it's an early game boss. What do you think? And here, finally, we see the dragon again. Unsurprisingly, it's breathing fire, and the guy is somewhat dying. When he's blasted by the fire, you get a good look at the shield. Once again, it really looks like the Dranglake shield, but perhaps it's just a similar design. And that's our final shot of the trailer. Quite a good one, I think. Showed just enough gameplay to tease us, and it gave us a good feel for how Dark Souls 3 will no doubt turn out. Next thing, we need an extended look at gameplay, or maybe even a demo. But let me know what you thought of the trailer. Until next time, you take care.